A year ago, I wrote my own obituary. At the time, I was preparing for hernia surgery, and I was convinced that if something went wrong, I wanted to leave behind more than paperwork. I wanted to speak for myself. I wanted my family to know what I wanted, rather than having to guess. In a way, writing my own obituary was an attempt to make peace with dying. In the end, I didn't beat my necrophobia. But in my reflection of it all, I found that writing my obituary helped me learn to trust myself. I was terrified of death for a long time before my surgery. My earliest memory was at a funeral for a man that I didn't know. And I was very young, and I was there with my grandmother. And we reached a point in the ceremony where everyone was forming a line next to the deceased. And I remember my grandmother telling me, he looks like he's sleeping. And everything in my child brain said, no, no, he doesn't. He does not look like he's sleeping. And the image is so vivid in my mind as one of the first times I noticed that I was experiencing the room differently than everyone else was. In 2025, I was scheduled for a major abdominal surgery, and I decided to stop running from discomfort. I was trying to prepare for my possible death. I wanted to speak for myself and give my family less to have to take care of. I recorded my reading of that obituary and posted it to YouTube, and I haven't watched it since because I trust who I was a year ago. When I wrote it, I wanted it to have hope. I wanted the world to keep trying to be a better place without me. And what I found was that really wasn't someone who was preparing to die. That was more like a final argument that life was worth living. This wasn't born purely of anxiety. It was originally a practical exercise, but it collided with my surgery. I checked out a book called Let's Move the Needle by Shannon Downey, and that encouraged me to keep a discomfort journal. I would intentionally expose myself to things that made me uncomfortable on a scale of 1 to 10. I would record how I felt leading up to the action, during, and after finishing it. And I challenged myself to do things like sitting outside in the dark and going out in my swimsuit. On the difficult side was conversations with my kids about my dying. And they decided they wanted to spend the rest of our time together playing video games. And you think that you're preparing children for tragedy, and they surprise you by responding, okay, let's hang out. And none of it was easy. Some of it was terrifying, but there was a responsibility to it. I couldn't stop being afraid, but I was teaching myself to stop letting fear make the decision for me. Then the thing I was preparing for didn't happen. I survived. And after surgery, my first coherent thought was that I'm alive. And someone nearby immediately answered, "Yeah, you are." And I don't know who he was, but he sounded proud of me for surviving. And that made me feel proud too. I spent 8 days recovering in the hospital, and while I was there, another member of my family was reaching the end of her life. Lady was an English Cocker Spaniel who spent 11 years attached at my side. I used to joke that I had been tagged by the Fae at birth, and that she was the creature that they sent to keep track of me. She ignored $300 dog beds in favor of dirty laundry on the floor. She scared off more than a few dates. And when she got excited, her natural response was the wiggle bottoms, where her entire rear end would wag. Lady wasn't just a pet. She was a companion with a distinct personality who had become inseparable from my own. She existed as a whole person in my life, and she developed a tumor under her hind leg that had grown beyond what we could treat. And by the time I came home, I knew her time was short. The real test came 3 days after I got home. Our family gathered around her as a veterinarian came to our home to help her pass peacefully. A year before then, I don't know if I could have done it. I don't know if I could have stayed in the room, if I could have looked at her, if I could have set aside my own fear long enough to think about what she needed. But I did. I sat with her, I held her, I comforted her in her final moments. And I was doing something for her that friends do for each other. I felt honored to see her through her final moments, and I've thought about it a lot since. I started this journey because I wanted to learn how to cope with my own death. I thought I was learning how to die, and instead I learned how to stay. I thought I was preparing for the worst thing that could happen to me, and instead I learned how to be there for someone I loved. Lady spent 11 years choosing to be by my side, and she deserved to leave this world surrounded by people who loved her. I thought writing my obituary was preparing for my own death, and looking back, I think it prepared me for hers. The obituary wasn't the end of the story, it was the beginning of becoming the kind of person who could hold a beloved friend in their final moments and stay. I still have necrophobia. I'm still afraid, and I don't think this story ends with me conquering that fear. If anything, I learned that courage meant becoming someone that others could trust when they were afraid. A year ago, I worried that fear would define how I met death, both my own and someone else's. And in the end, I discovered that love made me trustworthy enough to stay. Today, I'm here to tell this story because I survived, and because surviving taught me something I never expected. That sometimes the hardest part of living isn't facing your own ending, it's being willing to stay with someone you love until they reach theirs. I'm still afraid, but now I know that fear doesn't get the final word. I trusted my past self to write an obituary and never revisit it, and my children with difficult truths. I trusted my doctors to bring me through the surgery. I trusted myself to sit with fear instead of avoiding it, and to stay with her after her heart stopped. And most of all, I trust that people I love will survive my death, and that I will survive theirs. Thank you.